everyone. Welcome and good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kelly Olshan. I'm a program manager at Queens Council on the Arts. We're just going to give people a little bit of time to get settled and allow the stragglers to find the Zoom link. But in the meantime, would just love for all of you to introduce yourself via the chat. If you want to add your name, pronouns, discipline, social media handles, if you have them, would love to just start to get to know each other that way. See some familiar faces. Hi, Ellen. Hi, Julia. Hi, Lonnie. So we're going to have a pretty intimate group tonight, it looks like. I don't know if it's the summer and people wanting to be outside, but I think it's going to be roughly on the smaller side, which is fine with us. This session is being recorded just as an FYI so that anyone that wasn't able to make it can check it out on our YouTube page later, and I'll definitely circulate the event link as well. Just a couple of housekeeping things before you get started. This event is part of our monthly Creative Conversation series, which we hold every third Thursday of the month. And it's a way for Queens creatives, artists, community members to get to know one another and share some of the crucial issues that are facing artistic workers and the cultural sector. And tonight we're excited just to talk about what it means to sustain artistic work and labor during this time meaning the pandemic, this time meaning the crazy last year that we have had, financially, culturally, sociopolitically, we could go on and on. So with that, I would love to just go ahead and get started. I want to introduce two of our fabulous guest speakers that are going to be chatting this evening. They'll each talk about their work and their practice for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to group conversation. So I'm really excited first to introduce Daria Moore. Daria, if you want to give a little wave. Daria is a New York City-based interdisciplinary artist who creates interactive sanctuary experiences. He received a BFA from Buffalo State College and an MFA from the City College of New York. In addition to work created in painting, sculpture, and made digitally, he often includes assembled projects to build immersive sacred spaces. These often exist as unexpected places using mundane objects. He is the founder and director of Enclave Arts Alliance, Inc., which is a nonprofit for the recognition and representation of BIPOC artists in contemporary arts. Without further ado, Dario, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to see all of you and speak a little bit about what it was like creating in the pandemic from, one artist's point of view. The pandemic was I've just never experienced anything like this, as, none of us have. And we've all, had to find ways to get through it. And my way was finding a way just to tap back into my creativity. It's my escape. It's my way to, feel productive. And just being creative, it's what I do in my free time anyway, but I really leaned into it because, I just didn't want to, I wanted to, I guess in some ways, escape reality from the beginning of it. So what I did was I ended up just creating in my apartment, just whatever I had around. I was making, assemblages and things. And I was just very much in the mode of just using whatever I had. And, it was fun, it was cathartic, but I definitely felt like I needed more material and there was just not enough space where I was living. So, I threw the reel out there for some residencies. And, I got one on Governor's Island, and then SVA as well. That one was a remote one, so I was working at home still during that one. And it overlapped with the residency that I received from Materials for the Arts. And that one felt like, the gold mine, because I finally was able to use, objects and materials and, assemble, I was able to assemble things with stuff that wasn't just in my own house. I was able to, go outside of my space, go to a private studio and, bring whatever's in the warehouse inside. And it just felt like a kid in a candy store because it felt like it was all mine. Like no one else was coming in except for the people that worked there and me. And it was just, I really missed being around people. At the same time, I was scared. So I felt very safe being there. And, the staff and materials for the arts were just so welcoming and so just so wonderful. So I felt it was just an amazing opportunity to really process a lot of what I was feeling. And at the time, I was in the headspace of loss. Like, I mean, I felt like, so many people have lost people. We lost a sense of normalcy. It was just like in the back of my mind. So it felt natural to create the series that I created, which was just reflecting on some icons of mine, some, people that I really idolized growing up who happen to be musicians. I know, Chris, you're going to appreciate that. So really with this residency, I thought about like, who are some of the biggest influential musicians who passed away, who, that I could kind of honor in some way, honor the legacy of these people, and their kind of role in the greater story of music. I was thinking about like music is almost like a movie or like a novel, in terms of like the roles that different musicians have played in the industry. And, I thought about, I mean, Carl Jung happens to influence a lot of just the way that my own personal philosophy. So it was natural for me to, think about them as archetypes. So I thought about the 12 archetypes and ways that I can uh, and just like what roles different musicians who passed away played in terms of like the greater landscape of music. So I created different environments and really mainly sculptures, some of which included some old paintings that I've created. Like this is a painting I created a couple of years ago. Um, but yeah, just coming up with creative ways to be able to create almost like sanctuaries for these different figures that I idolized. And I'm not going to speak too much about this. It is available at on Material for the Arts website still. So I'm just going to put that in the chat really quickly in case you want to check that out later. But that was the very first um, full on like solo show that I had in the pandemic. And unfortunately, it was going to be remote. We had a Zoom opening and no one was able to really come to see the stuff in person, which was a big challenge for me because usually when I create the work, people are able to engage with it in their own ways. I like hearing people, their feedback on it, how they're able to sit down on some of the, in the piece itself. They're able to, sometimes there's food involved. There's different things that, different participatory elements that people can engage with. And that wasn't possible in the pandemic. So during my residency with SVA, like I got some feedback from Akra Shep, who's one of the advisors there, and he said, you need to find a way to activate it yourself. And I never thought of, performing myself, but when I thought about it, I was like, I think I'm going to have to perform in some way to be able to, at least show an example on how to engage with it. So for the first time, I thought about like, okay, I'm going to perform a ritual, and I decided on the first new moon of the year. So I believe that was February. No, that was January 13th, I believe. And yeah, that night I just um, uh, just had somebody record me going through and engaging with each of the pieces, like one after another, sort of like a well wish to the legacy of these figures, the archetypal figures in music. Um, and I ended up creating an activation video for it, which you can also see on my website. So I'm just going to play a little bit of it just so that you get an idea of. So I should have also mentioned this is a dark room show, so everything, lights up. So this was the very first entry, like the first experience I've ever had, like actually trying to performatively engage with my work. And obviously, it was a comfortable first entry point because there was no one around. Like I had no audience except for the camera person. So, I did that out of necessity for the show, but afterwards I ended up having a solo show at the residency that I got at Materials for the Art, no, at Flux Factory. And while there, I was thinking like, I think I want to continue to lean into this performance. This show is going to be in person and it's going to be just a very different experience. It's going to be a very personal show. Even though I feel like I personally connected with the figures, there was a lot of, I was like theoretically kind of labeling them as different archetypes and things like that. But for this show, it's titled Don't Let It Slip Through Your Fingers. It was dedicated to the loss of a treasured object, which is a ring that my grandmother had given me that I lost in 2019. So I ended up having this show on Mother's Day weekend a couple weeks back. And the object that inspired the show was this grave marker here that says 2019 on it. And I got that from Materials for the Arts and brought it over to Flux Factory, my new studio, and just felt like I needed to create this series, this project that was, kind of me really reflecting on loss in a more personal way, the loss of this ring that in 2019. In 2019, I felt like also opened up the floor and the space for many other people to project, things that they lost. I mean, 2019 is like the last normal year that we had. So like, I wanted to have that space for people to be able to engage with it as they would, at my previous shows before the Materials for the Arts one. But I also wanted to make it personal because it was personal. So I did decide to do another performance. And this performance was actually, I'll just flip through some of the pieces just to get an idea of the overall installation. There were 3 pieces in this show and they all tied together. The first one being Don't Let It, the second one, Slip Through, and the third one's called Your Fingers. And it's mainly made of paintings and installation. And I also created some public artworks that were on view, site-specific works in Weeping Beach Park, in Flushing, Queens, and in some other spaces. But I decided to create a ceremony called Closed Casket, which was dedicated to, it had a eulogy and also a performance ritual where I went to each piece and sort of had a poetic dedication and ultimately reckoning with the loss. And that's something that I did film. It is online, but it's also something I did publicly. So it was just it was an opportunity for me to further this this new trajectory and continue to challenge myself to push my work in a public way despite the pandemic. I think partially because I really wanted to have that engagement, that in-person experience, and making myself front and center, which is something that I wouldn't normally do. I think was something I was just compelled to do, probably in part because of the isolation of the pandemic. So if you want to watch the Closed Casket video, you can check it out on my website. I'm just going to put the link for that in the chat as well. But for equity of time, I'm just going to quickly just speak a little bit about the other hat that I wear, which is I also founded a nonprofit organization called Enclave Arts Alliance, Inc., which is for BIPOC artists in the contemporary art world. And that is a program that's actually been around since 2012, but we received nonprofit status in 2018. So we have had many different programs, but as of late, for the past 3 years, we've been, one of our main programs have been our Enclave Garden Project Fellowship. And we were very fortunate to receive a grant from Queens Council of the Arts last year to be able to put on this program in the Queens Botanical Garden, where we had 6 BIPOC artists transform the garden space just in a major way. Like, we had 6 fantastic artists from all different walks of life, different ages, different experiences, um, and different materials create work. And, last year we did this in the pandemic, and, at first the Queen Botanical Gardens was closed down. So we needed to find a way to be able to present the work. So we filmed, the installations, and we made a little documentary, and all these things. Got into the Astoria Film Festival, and we found creative ways to be able to still promote the artists despite the pandemic, which was something that like I would have never thought to have so much content online in terms of recorded interviews and videos and all these things. But the pandemic pushed us to do that, and I think in a great way, because we're able to move forward, knowing that these possibilities still exist, and to continue to showcase our artists in ways, in many different ways, for the broader public to see as well, and not just people who live in Queens or are able to come to see the work in person. So last year's our Enclave Garden Project Fellows were all of their work is on our website, and they include Kyle Shido, Christine Sloan Studdard, Cecilia Andre Asano Agari Gomez, Mariana Tonini Villas Boas, and Natalie Bravo Barbie, who are all Queens-based female artists, and they all really brought they really made just an amazing creative conversation just amongst each other in the space. And we have another set of artists this year who are going to be presenting as well, and I just would be remiss if I didn't shout them out. They include Moses Ross, Renluca Maharaj, Dennis Red Moon Darkeem, Martin Calvino, Christy Ben Cosme, and Graciela Kessel. In addition to our Enclave Artists in Residence, which is a new program that we started this year, and that is taking place at Kingsland Wildflowers with Yvonne Short. So, and she's actually going to be presenting her sculpture at an event this Saturday at Kingsland Wildflowers at 7 o'clock. So I just wanted to give a little bit of information about all of that. And thank you so much for Kelly for giving me the opportunity to share about my work, and also Queen Botanical or Enclave. So I'm very excited to share that, and yeah, very grateful as well.
Thank you so much, Dario. That was great. I really appreciated hearing your experience with the residency programs and various Queens connections that you pulled to the forefront. Appreciate the overview of your organization too. It seems like you're doing some really great work, and big fan of Queens Botanical Garden, of course.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Dario?
When do you have time to do all this stuff? That's my question. Any key to organizing your life? It sounds like even during the pandemic, you kept a busy schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I work very fast, and I don't know, I've always been this way. Like, if I have ideas, I need to run with them immediately. So like, I've got a sense of urgency as soon as I have ideas, and I don't want it to lose steam. So I end up like just working really fast, and then having time left over to get back to normal life. So I catch up afterwards. But yeah, my art is a major priority for me. So I end up making it happen one way or another.
That's a good quote. I just wrote that down. If I have ideas, I need to run with them immediately. I feel like that could be good advice for creatives to don't wait to dive into the thing.
And very inspiring too. That's very inspiring. That's because you tell the people too that you teach, as your day job, right? Because we mentioned that before we started. Just remind me, he's teaching kids.
Mm-hmm.
What grades do you teach again?
Well, right now I'm teaching elementary school. So yeah, I'm K through 4. And yeah, it wouldn't have been possible for me to do as much as I did, if we didn't go remote as well. So, I have to acknowledge that. And there were a lot of challenges switching like all my lesson plans and having to come up with brand new things to be able to accommodate that. But at the same time, I have to admit, like, in some ways, the work-life balance made it possible for me to be able to follow through with all these things. And that's a luxury that I was just lucky enough to be given. So, I have to acknowledge that. I'm sure a lot of other people, it's not as easy just to crank out work and, especially with so many, responsibilities and, they may have children. There's so much else that they may have on their plate. They may be caregivers. So, I mean, for me, like having that balance, I think definitely enabled me to produce as much as I did. Um, but yeah, I mean, we're all working through the pandemic in our own ways, and even if we didn't create a lot of work, I'm sure that we did what we need to do to be able to get through this trying time. And I know that myself, I need to be creative. Like that's my way to be able to process things, to get through things, and so it just felt natural for me to throw myself into the art.
Well, that's a silver lining I want to mention. I just want to mention the silver lining for you, especially, and someone of your temperament. I'm sorry, I'll let you speak, Julia, but I just want to mention the silver lining. For some people, the extra time turned out to be a gift.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
To be like, you know what? I actually there's nothing on there. Everything's closed. I have an idea. There's no distractions. Boom, let's do it.
As if artists just have it, we just are very lucky. Many artists that I've met, many artists who I've worked with Enclave in the past year and a half, and it seems across the board we're just very fortunate to have this hobby, this interest, this career. It could be, if we didn't have that, it could be something else. There are many vices out there that people have turned to. There are many other ways that people have found to cope that haven't been and we're just lucky that we have the inclination to create.
Julia, were you going to say something? You're muted.
Sorry, thanks. So Dario, when you were creating and when you have your idea, were there times when something just happened that you totally didn't expect that came out of the idea? I mean, some things that were totally unexpected and really meaningful to you, or were new ways of doing things. I've watched your rituals and at MFPA, and
Thank you, Julia.
yeah, no, I love that, and I love the way things kind of lit up, like you were saying, Kelly. The light was so beautiful. Were there surprises for you within that?
I mean, as I said, Materials to the Arts really feels like a candy land. I mean, just being able to find so many, like, I already had old paintings and things that I intended to recycle because that's a big part of my practice as well. Like reusing objects, reusing old paintings in a new way. Maybe that, like oftentimes we finish a work of art and we think that we can maybe, well, you think that it's done the first time. But for me, it's like down the road, I end up, I just keep all of my work and even just a lot of my junk. And I end up looking back on it and thinking, oh, well, I didn't anticipate that this would work with this other piece. Let me just juxtapose this with all this random stuff, right now and see what happens. And then it ends up becoming part of that as well. So it's like, it's, I feel like my work is never really done because I don't know when I may need to reuse things. And in that way, it's and it really is a gut feeling, like when you just feel like something's right, and as I said, like it's kind of just jumping on things and riding the wave while you feel it. So it's like as soon as I get the inkling, I'm just like, ooh, let me try that. And then I grab it and I put it and it just feels right. And then I'm just like, okay, well, obviously I need to, continue with this, or I need to at least like keep this in the area of these other objects so I could just stare at it for a couple of days and then figure out what I'm going to do with it. But then there's something here, and it's just something that you just feel. And synchronicity sometimes plays a role into it, which often guides, my life, just, things kind of validating or kind of seeming like, just kismet. Like, I'm trying to think of an example right now with my work. I will say that I experienced it a lot of materials for the arts because there's so much food for thought, like just our associations with objects and things, like, and how, especially when you're thinking along the lines of like what the objects represent in terms of like maybe, music or, a persona or, different things. There was just a lot of room for you to freely associate. So for me, it's like all kinds of synchronicities were happening that felt like, okay, well, this is meant to be. And I don't question it anymore. I'm like superstitious after I get it. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to put this together. Does it feel right? I mean, it must because I was compelled to do this. And at some point, I end up like, yeah, somehow after I'm done, I just feel like, yeah, this is all complete now. I get that feeling that it's complete. And I know that a lot of artists have, it's hard to step away and think that you're fully done with something. But for me, for whatever reason, for a short period, I do feel like I'm done until like 2 years later when I end up needing to drudge it up again and reuse it for another piece. And then it's like, oh, I thought I was done with that, but I guess not. Now here it is in another iteration with a bunch of other stuff. And yeah, that's just my process. It's a strange one, but yeah, I never throw things out. And I guess I'm never really truly done.
I think I
Thank you, Julia.
good transition. Everything is one continuous painting, one continuous piece, and one continuous conversation. So let's transition, but I want us to hold on to some of the thoughts that came up about unforeseen blessings and silver linings, time as a gift, artists being lucky, and let's come back to that for the group conversation. But first, I want to introduce our second incredible guest speaker, a Queens-based composer of classical music who resides in Astoria with its many ethnic worlds encompassed in a small corner of New York City. Christopher Sahar, or Chris Sahar, holds a BA from Oberlin College and an MM from Queens College City University of New York, with additional studies at Juilliard's Evening Division. He continues his education as a member of New York Composer Circle, which offers forums to learn and grow as a composer. His works have been performed both in the United States and in Europe and in Russia. He works as an organist and choral accompanist at Christ Lutheran Church in New York and teaches composition and piano privately. We asked Chris to come speak because he's someone that's very much thinking about his role as a caregiver as well as his Astoria-based music composition practice and balancing those two things. Chris?
Hi, guys. By the way, my name is not Dayad Sahar, as you see. And they said, why don't you change the name on my screen? And I said, no, actually, it's a happy mistake. We were talking about fortunate mistakes. I'm on my mom's computer. This is the room I actually grew up in as a kid. Turned into a computer study many years ago. As soon as we left the house, my parents were like, we're gonna make it our own. But that's my mom's first name, Diane. And that's the person I've been very involved with caregiving since about 2017. What happened was, my father passed away along with my youngest brother back in 2010. So she was a widow. So there was a period of helping her out more. I had a brother nearby, and then he moved to Boston a couple years later. And during that period, I finally decided, it was a couple years after my father's death and my brother's, I said, you know what, I moved to New York City, even though I was raised in Jersey, not far, to actually get my degree in music because I never got my undergraduate degree. And I was like, I want to do it. That was back in 1994. And, a couple years after my father's death, I think around 2012, I said, it's about time I just get this thing done with. I got accepted, and at the time I said, I don't think I can afford it. And my family said, my mom especially said, look, we'll definitely help you out. We can do it. And I said, are you sure? I mean, I'm not going to an expensive school, but it's still money. So that's how I got my master's in music. Without having an undergraduate in music, I was able to get my master's in music because Oberlin has a lot of good music courses. So I took some way back then. I did try to get for a master's in music way back in the early 90s at Westminster Choir College. It was to be a piano pedagogy degree, which means a piano teacher. And I really want to focus on composition. So I left it as well as some debt. And anyways, so it was a big gift. It really meant a lot that my family, especially my mom, supported me with this. And I got my degree in 2015. She was there, my brother was there, whatnot. So 2 years later, in 2017, she fell. She was having balance problems. And she went into rehab. And that's when I started to be more here at her house. I'd usually be here about 2.5 days a week. I would do stuff like her laundry because it'd just be safer than, we thought it'd be safer than doing the laundry at the rehab center, hearing all the stories of what could happen. And I don't drive a car, total New Yorker, so good old bus with a bag of laundry. And dirty laundry going back and forth. But it was the least I could do. You know, it's my mom. Well, she came back and she never regained her ability to walk. She came back in a stretcher. And we thought maybe it was just a facility. And then 2 months later, they were discovering plaques on her forehead. And it's a very unusual manifestation, but sometimes metastatic breast cancer or metastatic cancers can show as plaques, skin plaques on your forehead. So one lesson I gained from that is go to your dermatologist once a year, please. Even if you have nothing happens, it's just a safety. So we've discovered it was breast cancer, and that's the reason why she had not regained her mobility, because the breast cancer they later found had went to her spine. At this time, she was 83 years old, going on 84. And we didn't think she would, the doctors didn't think she would make it past a couple of months. And then she bet predictions, and she was cancer-free up until, for 3 years, practically up until 1980, until November of last year, of 2020. So because I was closest, one thing you guys should know, or you may know already as a caregiver, caregivers fall, the likelihood of being a caregiver is if you're female. Unfortunately, that's just what it is for some reason, and proximity. So I was the closest, and I had been seeing my mom anyways, helping her along when she was widowed. She needed help with some stuff here or there. So I've been more involved. So my life is about 3.5 to 4 days in Jersey, 3.5 days in, sometimes less, occasionally more, in Astoria. So I mention all that because, as I said, I got my degree in Masters of Music, something I wanted to do for a very long time, in 2015. So I had about a year to kind of enjoy being a musician, and then, more my main focus. I was always doing it. Let me just qualify that. As you can see, I did try before. I was composing at Juilliard. I was composing and having works performed. I had a publisher in Greece for a couple of years before we moved to educational publishing of music, but just more profitable. Classical concert music is a tough field to make money on. But he got me a concert in Greece. That was wonderful. And he made beautiful publications. So I was doing stuff, but when I graduated, it just helped. I never had a music degree. So it helped get a church job. It made it easier to just get a church job and other work outside of being a composer. So even during that, before I got my degree, I was studying organ, and that's how I got to be a church organist. I studied that with some good people. So I was prepping myself anyways, because I was always doing it. I was composing since a kid, making up stuff. A lot of it wasn't very good, though the ideas might be nice, but that's the way you learn. You just keep at it until you finally start to get better. You have to write a lot of crap before you do something really good. Nature of the beast. So being in the period of COVID, how I've coped, it really hasn't been a huge change. The only stress was getting medical attention. As many of you have noticed, finding medical appointments and stuff during COVID was impossible. Telehealth really didn't kick it if you had 103-degree fever and chills and you were wondering if it was COVID or not. And the doctor's like, well, just go to the emergency room if this goes on for 2 days. Not very pleasant. For my mom, it was just more like, because of her condition, we were lucky to have some great home health aides, and we still do, and a doctor who arranged to have a nurse visit and at least give us some help. and whatnot. So because of her condition, I think it's actually, in some cases, it helped a little bit because she has terminal cancer, to get some of the stuff that someone might be healthy and no record. I think I saw that even for myself during COVID. It was harder, and because the priority is there. Now you're wondering, as an artist, of course it reduced what I did. I think in the music world it was hit much harder. Music is a temporal art, and the best you can do, and if you think about it, before recording technology developed well, and it took a while, you started really getting great recordings, beautiful, great recordings in the 1940s and the 50s, really. Even though you had plenty before, but in the 1950s is when you got these stellar recordings that people still go to with the vinyl and the translation. And then if you notice, you don't see too many people racing out for the great quality of the recording of music from the 1920s or 10s or 30s, because you get it more for the historic stuff, because the quality is there. But before that, for thousands and thousands of years, music would be extremely ephemeral and temporal. As soon as you heard it and it was over, that's it. That's why people got their ears so well done. If they wanted to be a musician, I think you had to have a much better ear back then than you do now, because if you wanted to remember a piece of music, you had to learn to notate it in some way. That was the only way. So we kind of went into that situation a little bit. No more live performances for a while, and you had to rely on older performances. So I think the benefit to me and a lot of other musicians, is you revisited your ear. You revisited, your inner imagination more. But it also challenged my identity more, because as a caregiver, I was already being challenged. I didn't have as much time to do performing gigs, or I'd think twice about taking a composition thing. For example, I got accepted to Yard Wire. This is a very unusual group, two percussionists, which they could play everything from marimbas, snares, bass drum, really, and they could cover a huge amount, and two pianists. Two separate pianists could play. The reason why that combination's unusual, think about this way. Imagine hauling 2 grand pianos for a concert, and then a battery of like 24 percussion instruments onto a stage, and then you have to have them perform. It's cumbersome. It's easier to just get a string quartet, or just get a band, a jazz trio or a band to play. But I got accepted and I did this thing. But that took a risk. I had to see if I could get the home health aides to cover when I wasn't around, make sure that, check with everybody that, everything's set. And I still ran out. It wasn't too far. And I also couldn't go too far. I was out on Long Island, Stony Brook. And even then, I ran out to Jersey at one point, just be overnight, to be like, Mom, everything's going well, because anybody in that situation will start to miss you. So let me also qualify, I'm not the caregiver point where I'm like doing cleaning and all the activities of daily living. I do that 2 days a week in the afternoons, but it's easier. She's usually tired and she's usually not doing that much. But the point is that I'm not doing all the heavy work. The home health aides are, and you have to treat them right. And COVID has also challenged it. I lost a home health aide person because she misunderstood me and thought I was accusing her of giving my mom COVID, because she, for some bizarre reason, thought my mom had COVID. And we lost her, and it was nasty. So I lost a home health aide, and other home health aides were very stressed out because of we reduced hours at one point, and long story short. So I didn't have it as, I was challenged my identity as a caregiver, but even more during COVID, because at the beginning, at least, it was a challenge, because we had this new variable there, and my mom wanted me there more often because she was nervous, and I was spending up for about 6 weeks there. Fortunately, my church position, I was still working as a church organist, they covered my costs, and then they covered by the payment protection program. I also qualified for some unemployment benefits and pandemic benefits because as a musician, I lost, 40 to 50% of my income from live stuff, accompanying and whatnot, and just even some teaching live. So that was the good thing. I also had time, but the time was spent more with dealing with this new variable. I did compose. They had a lot of composers ended up being, well, not a lot, but composers that did it, they would do virtual concerts. So, and you guys have seen it, sort of like the living room concert where they perform it here and record it. So I wrote something for 2 cellos, Mysteries and Hysterics. Thank you. So I guess what I'm trying to say about all this stuff, I haven't written as much since. And partially because the identity has been still a challenge. And I have to say, being at home and helping my mom, you start to look through your family stuff. And there's other interests that have developed too. My family, I found in my family, they were collectors of coins and stamps. And there's a rich area there. And it was something to kind of deal with the limitations I had with my music to put something towards there. I'm still writing. It's just sort of like writing for smaller forces. And I kind of think of the composers during World War I. If you study classical music and a lot of art, Western music, you'll notice that huge works for orchestra start to just dissipate after 1912, 13, 1917, after World War I. World War I really killed a lot of people, killed a lot of musicians. And some countries like Germany, which used to have a lot of these composers writing gigantic orchestras, went through economic turmoil. So, and then you had this, and in 1918, you had the famous Spanish flu. So I sometimes try, when I'm dealing with this fact of there's reduced forces out there, the impulse to compose is not as strong, I have other things, I try and think of historical events beforehand. And a good example is Stravinsky. Stravinsky wrote in the early 20th century after writing Rite of Spring and the war came. I know we don't have little time, but he's a very smart man, very thrifty, and he was very smart with his money. That's why he was able to retire and do well, versus Schoenberg, his compatriot, didn't do so well with his money. Stravinsky then wrote L'Histoire d'un Soldat, History of a Soldier, just for like a 7-piece band, like 6 or 7 instruments. That's it, or even less. And they didn't play all the time. And he did that because there weren't that many musicians. He was living in, I think he was in Russia. He moved to Geneva and Paris, and he was in Geneva and Paris, and Paris, awful stuff happened. And it really, is an example of paring down. So right now, the only thing I've been doing to channel my compositional thing before we go, the one gift of being a church organist and church musician is you have to improvise. You have to improvise. There's a lot of walking music. And I have a flutist that loves to do that. So I've been able to channel some of my composition and creative energies to developing the improvisation skills with her and on my own. Especially as I don't have much time to practice. If you can think of it, access to organs have diminished a lot. Fortunately, I had a connection before the pandemic to a church in Elmhurst, and I'd be able to go to that once in a while. But with the pandemic, a lot of churches wouldn't let anybody go in. So these are the ways I've done it, and I'm going to tie one line. I know we're 5 minutes, but I want to tie one thing that was very important that Dario mentioned. I think you mentioned about Jung. And the important thing about Jung is his concept of the shadow. Basically, this idea of the shadow is all the things we haven't become in full due to our choices we've made. So every choice you make, there's an inclusion and an exclusion. And sometimes when our choices are reduced and certain choices that we had an option to make are removed, we're forced to face our shadows of all the things that we are not completely formed or not completely pursued. And now we have time to reconsider it. And I have to say that, just going to coin collection and stamps, I never would have thought of it, but it was a family legacy from just going through, helping to clean out the house and start preparing, because I know my mom's gonna die. It's a terminal illness. So part of his facing is going that, but the good thing was it gave time to explore a new thing. and also still improvisation, something I've always done, and I was happy to still have that skill set to explore it more, something that I've explored, but I really got a chance to explore more because I had made choices to focus more on composition. And the two are different in a way. So I think the Jungian shadow is a very profound guide to understanding it. And Dario, I like the fact that you refer to that in your work at the beginning, because I think that's a key to getting through a lot of adversity. All adversity does is just have you face your shadows. Because lastly, and this is a visual art, if you need shadows to perform structure visually. Light obliterates form, shadow delineates it. But the combination is the ideal, the balance of it. And I think that's what COVID, and even when you go into a period of caregiving and whatnot, it offers that special gift to delineate better who you are by visiting the shadows. Because not everything can be light, flowers, balloons, and happy times. You need a little of this. That's it.
I just want to say, I mean, that was very profound. I mean, all the history that you gave me a lot of food for thought. I'm like, I wish I knew all of this before I started my the series, but I may revisit it. I may go back and incorporate some.
I'll give you my email.
Okay.
I'll put it right here.
But you're right. I mean, all of the I mean, creating in the pandemic, there's a lot of shadow work happening there. I mean, there's a lot that you need to, I mean, just a lot of demons that we faced and a lot that, which is a lot of, content to use for our work. And, it's a safe place to be able to mine that stuff in art. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely been, I know that for some people it's probably been a time where it's kind of scary to face some of those things, like, things that we maybe like didn't really, kind of like push down in our psyches about ourselves or about, just our situations. I know a lot of people changed jobs in this time. I know a lot of people, had breakups, all kinds of things have happened, because, whatever was in the shadows came to the surface. And, I mean, we're just, I mean, I thank God for art. That's all that I could say. And yeah, I mean, with your music and, I mean, it all is just an amazing outlet. I mean, I just really can't stress that enough for so many people that I know who have gone through so much in this time. Like, just find something creative to do. Like, it just really helps. I mean, at least for my own experience, I feel like it was just so necessary.
No, it does. And one thing I want to just say and let others speak, but it's interesting dealing with people who collect, though. There's a creativity to it. It's amazing what people will collect within a subset. I mean, in coins, there's whole books on people searching, and they have the equipment. It is an art. They're like the art of finding particular errors. They have the microscopes. They go through the research, and it's all in quest for what is a common coin, billions made, but with the error, it suddenly makes it quite special. So in the artistic process, it's a similar idea of taking something very common that most people like. Big deal, the big deal, you have a red wall, or big deal, that's Twinkle Twinkle. Well, it is, but here's one example. Mahler, in his first symphony, does variations on Twinkle Twinkle. So look up Mahler's first symphony, and he turns this real mundane children's song into a series of variations that are hilarious, and yet really just like this musical, psychological roller coaster ride. So I think these people that like do the errors or even just look for a beautiful coin, it's a mode of creativity. It's not the same as creating, but there's some of that trying to make the pedestrian extraordinary. And I think that's what a lot of creativity does. That's the goal of creativity. Just make something pedestrian or you never thought of extraordinary. Because you're bringing out some aspect of it that you're like, wow, that actually is special. And I never thought it was special, but it is. you know? So that's one thing I think too. It doesn't have to be an art painting, you know, the traditional thing, just something that is constructive, beneficial, and yeah, like you said, you know, it's not destructive to you health-wise or mind-wise.
It makes me think of Soul. I don't know if anyone here saw that movie. It won the Oscar for, I think, Best Animated Feature or something, but you didn't see it?
Not yet. No, I haven't gotten into.
Oh, it's about a jazz
I've
musician.
been catching up on old movies
Okay.
at home a lot with TCM.
Well, you may like it because it's all about chasing your spark, and
Okay.
you know, we as artists, like we can ignite a spark in other people by creating a sense of wonder in them, or inspiring or whatnot, which is a beautiful experience, a beautiful thing to kind of like put out there in the world. But yeah, I mean, you can find your spark in all kinds of things. It doesn't have to be just being creative. Yeah, of course. I mean, collecting or I don't know, putting puzzles together, like whatever your spark is.
Also making it a big thing. An exercise program too. People who are very big in exercise have gotten themselves in pretty good shape. I have to say that. That's another thing too. And they've had to be very creative and figure out how to. That's one thing I'll say. Fitness, by the way. I could go to my gym. I was doing last summer. This is really ridiculous. You should have seen me. I found stones in the garden, and I would use them as my little weights to do stuff sometimes because I'd be so sick and tired of being home. So I'd be like, okay, some bricks, let's lift them.
I find that sparks come and go. It's what you do with the embers that's important in between.
No, yeah, you're right. The embers.
Nice nugget.
That's a funny thing because that makes me think as a church organist. What do you think we do with Ash Wednesday? We burn. The Ash Wednesday is from the palms that are burnt the prior year, and the residue is what you put on your thing for the cross. So it's always connecting the cycle of the prior year to the next before another regeneration.
That happens in a lot of indigenous cultures around the world too.
Oh yeah, Christianity, like, my God, there's nothing, religions don't have anything really especially incredibly unique. It's just the mode of their expression of them that gives them their distinction. As you said, there's tons of indigenous cultures that do it, and even earlier religions before Christianity that had something like that. I just think the embers is kind of a nice thing about, like, you could even relate it to something as simple as like Ash Wednesday, because you're doing something with those embers by putting it on, having people put on the forehead as a symbol.
You all are full of really profound and compelling sound bites. I've just been like taking notes of metaphors about embers and the role of creativity. That was really great. Thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, Lonnie, that's great.
Does anyone else have any thoughts or reactions to Chris's presentation?
Chris?
Yeah.
What did your mother, does she hear your music?
She does, and it's a mixed bag. When she went to the recital, like, for 2015, when I graduated, some of the stuff she enjoyed a lot. I had this ridiculous, let me just say, I've tried to start writing some operatic works, but that's one area that I'm very frustrated with because because I've written my own librettos like an insane man. I can see why Wagner was a little bit crazy, because you write your own librettos and the music for 3-hour operas, I think you're going to be a little addled. But anyways, I mentioned that because one thing that she liked was this ridiculous piece of music I had come up with, and it was like a trance. Dario, this was one of those cases where I couldn't let go of the characters. She loved this one piece called The Singing Sisters of Waterloo, Tennessee, and the whole plot came to me of two hardcore classical singers singing, all this avant-garde music from the 1950s, finding that their audiences are dwindling, and through a happenstance, redirection of their plane to Branson, Missouri, they discover country music and decide to be country music stars. So I decided to take a scene of them towards the end of their career, just trying to do their show, undercutting each other, and it becomes a ridiculous piece. But I couldn't help it. These stupid women were in my head, and the lyrics were just coming to me like very much. So that she enjoyed. And once in a while, she likes a couple of things. There's a lot of things that just leaves her, but I'm used to that. You never know what people are going to react to. You just don't know. And my mom's type of listening, I apologize for giving such a long answer, but my mom's type of listening is more like, she listens to some classical, but it's more traditional. She's open-minded to some degree, but she's more traditional. I mean, she loves Benny and the Jets, and stuff like that. And I remember many parties listening to Enrico Macias from the 1970s. He's just one of these world, and Nana Mouskouri, this type of stuff. That's the stuff I grew up hearing, as well as Arabic music. My father was Palestinian, so I did hear a lot of what they call Fairuz.
Different sound.
And oud. So I heard a lot of Middle Eastern music, but it was Middle Eastern pop.
Wow.
Stuff.
That's super interesting.
I
Thank
gotta
you.
throw this in. My mother's 92, and she's also one of my biggest fans. And when she can't, she ups and comes to my gigs. But every now and then I throw this back at her, and I'm gonna give you a censored version. Especially when I was first learning how to play as a guitarist. Turn that fill in the blank down. Right back in her face.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how these things come around full circle,
Yeah. No, I used to bang a lot as a kid. My father used to be like, "Oh, you're angry today," because I would just bang out improvisations on the piano and come home. I'd be like, "Okay, whatever." That's the other reason why I'm very appreciative of my family. They got to hear me just like splay out on the piano as a kid, a teenager,
And now you're running around shouting, Oscar Peterson stole my licks, man.
I know, exactly. Yeah. Actually, at my age, it would be more like I stole Oscar Peterson's licks later on.
I was trying to be diplomatic, Chris. Come on, man.
I know. Anyways, they've been very generous to bear with all that craziness I used to do as a kid.
Thank you. Great. Thanks.
No problem.
So we've had a couple people join us during the course of the presentations. Not a problem at all. I just thought, maybe it would be helpful to just take a beat before we dive into a group discussion, just go around and do a quick round of introductions since it's a smallish group of us. Maybe just do name, pronouns, discipline, keep it simple. And then once you finish, you can popcorn it to someone who hasn't gone. So Dario, I'll start with you.
My name is Dario Moore. I am an interdisciplinary artist, painting, sculpture, assemblage, installation, and digital art. And pronouns he, him, his. I don't know if was that all the questions, Kelly? Okay. And I'm gonna throw it to Chris.
Okay, Chris Sahar, pronouns he, him, right, his. I can never remember all the pronouns. I am a musician, composer, organist, church organist, pianist, and that's my artistic role, and my day jobs are, or other roles as caregiver, and also I forgot to add, I do substitute educator at a public school. I've been doing it through COVID. That's been kind of cool. So anyways.
Toss it to someone.
Oh, I forget to talk. Ellen. Is Ellen there?
Yes, hi. My name is Ellen, Ellen Niz, and I'm a mixed media artist working mainly in sculpture and collage. And my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I live and work in Jackson Heights. And I will toss it to Julia.
Hi, I'm Julia, and I am she, her, hers, and I'm an artist and a teaching artist, and I do my teaching artist work, or have done it actually, with materials for the arts. And so that is how I met Kelly, actually. So that was really nice. And it's a great place. And Dario, you know, there's kind of that connection there. So I've really enjoyed listening to your creative processes and just kind of getting to know you a little more. Thank you so much. And thanks, Kelly, for bringing us together, all of us. It's been really nice for me. Thank you.
You toss it, Julia.
Toss it?
Yes.
Oh, I gotta toss it. Hold on.
To someone
Okay,
else.
I'm gonna toss it to Lonnie, please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lonnie Harrington. I guess he, his, him. Okay, short version. Florida transplant, although I've lived in Rego Park for 22 years, and I've been living now in St. Albans for 22 years. Musician, dancer, storyteller, historian, arts administrator, sometimes stage manager. That's the short version. And I'm not sure who to toss it to with this because I'm also a lifetime member of the Technologically Challenged Hall of Fame. So I'm having problems reading the screen, and I don't see anybody else who hasn't been covered already. So, and Kelly, you already introduced yourself, so I guess I'll toss it back in your lap.
No worries.
There's Anna and Michelle.
Yeah. Anna, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Gurayev. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm an artist from Mexico City, currently living in New York City. I mainly work in fibers and video, and I'm an aspiring educator. I'm studying K-12 art education. Thank you.
Not the last,
I
but
guess
not
I'm the only one left.
yeah.
So I'm Michelle. Sorry I'm late. I must have read the times wrong. So I really thought I was coming on time, but I'm an hour late. She, her, hers, my pronouns, and I'm a writer. So I write nonfiction, creative humor. And of course I'm very musical and I choreograph, so I'm just very artistic. And yeah.
Great. Thank you all. Thanks for humoring the introductions. I know we did things a little bit backwards, you know, doing the intros later in the game, but thought it'd be helpful to have a sense of who is in the room, given that we had a couple people join us. So I'd love to just kind of open the virtual floor and have more of a chat and conversation that's informal. And maybe we could just start by picking up on something that Dario put forth, this notion that we as artists are lucky because we have something that endlessly compels us in a time or during a time where there was literally a shortage on puzzles because people were looking to occupy themselves. Curious what other people's thoughts or experiences are with that. Do you identify with feeling lucky? Or, of course, there are many, many ways we could talk about being unlucky as well. Thoughts?
I found that this time actually reinforced some of my bad habits, creatively speaking. Now, specifically, pre-COVID, I spent a lot of time hustling gigs, but when I wasn't doing that, certainly working in my music, well, I've worked a lot on my music and reinforcing my bad habits. I pay too much attention to guitar, not enough in percussion. I still got songs in the back burner, which I hope to be recording later on this year. So, but that's a more pleasant kind of dilemma to have, in my estimate. Something I got to work on.
I'm from Alaska, so I came here like 2 years ago feeling totally overwhelmed and like I'm so behind. I have so many projects to do. And I took COVID as a chance to catch up. And now I feel like a New Yorker, yay. So I really took advantage of the time and the gift that we had all this time, and I had a chance to catch up. I felt very fortunate.
Yeah, Absolutely. Was time an unforeseen silver lining for anyone else? I feel like that's a trend that keeps coming up.
I feel a little bit guilty saying this, but yeah, I kind of had an excuse to be antisocial that I hadn't before. I used this opportunity as like a break from a lot of things and just a lot of introspection at the beginning of the pandemic. But I didn't have the same experience with my work. I just stopped doing my work for a long time, and I just restarted it recently. So yeah.
I had an interesting thing happen. Excuse me, I'm a painter. I paint. And so I missed everyone so much. You know, it was so abrupt how our lives changed. And I just missed everybody, but I don't even know if I even knew it. So what I used to do is I would envision going up the stairs and, you know, doing everything I usually did and try and see the people that I would see along the way. And so then I started trying to paint them. And, you know, it was kind of going nowhere. And all of a sudden I started painting this new way, which was like a painting from your feelings. I mean, literally painting your feelings. And all of a sudden, these things started looking like the people that I was missing. And it was a whole new process. So I felt that was, I don't know if I'll ever be able to go back there because that was generated from those feelings. And I don't know, it was really kind of an interesting thing for me to have that happen.
It's beautiful, Julia.
No, that's great, Julia. You made me think. There's a one other thing to whenever I like to do other things, but I do not consider myself creative. No, I enjoy writing poetry, but I like taking photographs. But to me, that's just like somewhere between non-creative and creative rest. And what I was going to say is that there was this one picture I remember taking, Times Square, and I posted on my Facebook, and I just said to everybody, people talk about, oh, I'm so looking forward to everything going back to normal. But one thing people I think need to do is question before they dive right back into it, was normal all that great?
Thank you, Chris.
And I don't think people are asking it themselves enough. I mean, I think there's a lot we don't want anymore. Of course, we don't want disease and death and uncertainty and economic stuff. But there is things that people seem to have forgotten. So one thing that I think it's been a gift is to question what we accept as normal. And I think people did that at the beginning when they said, like I remember in India, the first couple of weeks, they were astounded how clear their air was because human activity had reduced. And I keep saying, I've said to some people, why can't we just, have a quiet Sunday morning or does the subway really have to run 24 hours all the time? Maybe there could be, it's nice that they cleaned it, for 2 or 3 hours. Maybe you could do that, maybe not every week, but maybe, twice a month, you just do a 1 to 5 and you clean the subway. It's, it's nice. So your thing made me think of that, by missing the people, not seeing them and being forced to see them in a new way, it made you paint because you had to create a new normal with your art. And I think we also have to do that when we come back, and we should kind of question what we're getting back to sometimes.
Well, rational thought is not a priority for too many, in my humble opinion.
No.
That's just me.
I'll say that, I mean, one of my biggest pastimes is going to concerts. Like that's like the main thing. And especially here in New York, like all my favorite bands come here. So it's just, I'm never going to go to a concert without a mask again. I'll say that. That's one thing that's part of my new normal. and I haven't had a cold in 2 years, and I'm somebody who's used to having colds like a couple times a year. So, realizing that like has just made me a lot more, iffy about, like I never, not only, when I come inside, but I mean, just in general, I'm sanitizing all day, every day. And maybe that's not for the better, but you know what? I mean, not getting a cold in 2 years doesn't lie. Like, I mean, it's just a big change for me, and a lot of other things like just, being aware of personal space and things like that. Of just, and this isn't art related, but yeah, I mean, just, speaking to, what you're saying, Chris, about new normal, like, I've seen a lot of changes just in my personal life in terms of how I plan to, you know, I mean, and obviously, like when everyone else is doing it, like say in 2 years, it's everything's, seems a lot more back to normal, and everyone else, it's easy to be influenced and kind of like, not, not feel as like as much conviction and what we're saying in the here and now. But I really believe that certain things are going to be permanent, and that's one of them. I'm never going to a concert without a mask again.
Well, Chris, you sort of implied this before as a performing artist, and you might share some of this. I am kind of paranoid about some situations where I make my living now. I mean, I know clubs are going to be slow to come back, but hey, they're going to be crowded. Who's vaccinated and who's not? How do I rehearse with my ensemble when I can't afford to pay them? In other situations I perform in, I know I'm gigging outdoors next week, so that's not exactly an adverse situation, but what happens to the indoor gigs? And do I turn them down in the meantime? I got to admit, this will give me a lot of food for thought. And I think performing artists, we have some real hard questions we need to ask ourselves in terms of safety, not only for ourselves, but thinking about who our audiences are and who we're around.
Well, I think that's even just visual artists or anybody who has to put something in a space, because if you think about some of the spaces that I've been to for an art exhibit, some of them, I mean, I must say, are suffocating. Not all, but you know that, Kelly. You've been to a couple and you're like, ventilation would really draw a lot more audience members. Not your art, your ventilation. But I've actually had a case where I had to. My church, they paid me for a while out of their own pocket. They paid me out of the thing. And in August, we started recording it. And then the congregation says, well, we want to have live services. So we started doing the spacing. And so all I can say to you is the one advantage as a keyboard player or organist, the organ's a great little barrier anyways. I mean, if you think about it, I have this big box, I have a shield in front of me. I've been able to put down my mask to play because there's no one near me. And I have the kind of protection as long as everything else, the windows, where we have proper ventilation. And the church is well ventilated, and they've been very, very, very conscious about it and very stringent about how many people come in. And sometimes that was difficult, especially around Christmas and Easter. So I think it's going to impact that, at least in the medium to short term. In the long term, I don't know. I think for the performer, as a performing artist, and I don't know about other people in the other arts, I think because of the Zoom call like this, I even notice outside of it, people are going to use that more. It's going to become much more of a component of smaller concerts. Like no longer is it the big concerts where, okay, I could see the stream on it. But I'm thinking that much smaller venues are going to do it, but guess what? They might start developing fee structures for it, because the large concerts, their advertisers and the people coming in will cover it, and streaming is not a big deal. But the smaller concert venues may consider some sort of maybe goodwill offering, or they might offer special subscription services to the thing where they'll say for $25 a year, $30 a year, you can get free streaming of entire concerts, and it'll help our arts organization, our performance organization, whatever. So that may happen. In other words, what the common streaming of larger venues is going to go down to the smaller ones, but I think the smaller ones are going to see this as a potential fundraising income stream much more than they ever did before. Because I seen it outside of coin collecting, my coin club, one of the side interests I developed. They're like, we're going to continue with the Zoom meetings because when we have live, it's great for the members that can't come out.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as something to add to the category of unforeseen silver linings or benefits, and that I think collectively as cultural workers, we realized, oh, we could have been doing this all along. We had the virtual technology, whether or not, people could physically all come to a space, you can use Zoom or this live streaming technology to triple or quadruple an artist's platform, and make it accessible to anyone with an internet connection. So that's the positive side. And then one of the, I think the flip sides of that is, at least my experience as a cultural worker, is feeling like stressful to try to acquire a skill. I didn't know how to, video edit or do a live streaming thing. And meanwhile, the world is falling down around you and you're like, I'm going to teach myself video editing. And I think about that for artists too, because I feel like artists are expected to not only know their craft, but also to be marketers, to be fundraisers, to be project managers. It's like, is this another thing that we're going to add to the long list of expectations, things that artists have to do to sustain themselves in a contemporary world? And yeah, and then the question is, if yes, then it's people like my English. It's my job and people like me's job to provide professional development and support, but I don't love the idea of something else being added to the artist's plate as an expectation.
Well, Kelly, let me interject. I think, like, just from the churches, you just talked to church musicians, the music directors are ending up doing that, and they're facing that situation where now they're like, well, guess what? This will be part of your thing. The churches that are fair and equitable will say, well, look, you're doing this, so we'll keep your salary the same, and then we'll take some other responsibilities and move it on to this. Or they'll say, we should pay you more because we realize the benefit of this Zoom. It's just what is more. But that's also the reason why I think the smaller venues with very restricted budgets may look into monetizing. I hate the word monetize. Putting a fee, just put it straight, start charging people something, because they're going to be like, look, the video editing takes work, and it does take a lot more work. I'm sorry, visual artists, it does take work. All you need to do is do a narration of your work, voice over it. You're going to find out so many things. You'll be like, what is that weird echo? Oh, wait a minute. There's people talking in the corner and it's being picked up. Oh, there's a train outside. Oh, someone has a lawnmower. What the? And you're doing all this editing to get it. And you start to learn things like, okay, we have to match that frequency to my voice because we can't get rid of the air conditioner hum, which is really noticeable. So you think it's really going to be like, oh, it's straightforward, just doing a voiceover. It's not, actually. It's not too difficult if you control the space, but we've had, my poor music director, we've had to shush people, and we've had recording sessions because what we've done is we have a choir. We don't want the choir to do live, so we've recorded the choir in rehearsals after church, and then my music director, she gets paid more, definitely, because she's doing this, but she has to EQ, equalize, let's say, the choir to the sound of a lawnmower that's in the background, just enough to be heard so that it's covered, and all these other things. So Kelly, I feel for you. I hope they don't do that. I hope they come up with something else, like something else where they get interns to do it, because it's a great skill for interns to learn without it being too complicated. But I think that's going to go across many more, not just the music world. I think it's going to go over across more. People are going to expect a higher quality of video presentation. And the visual artist might be surprised at what people expect. Sometimes it's not always realistic. Sometimes. So just a heads up.
Chris and Kelly, I actually want to speak to both of your points. So Chris, I already know about an app because I've been downloading concerts. Well, not download, I've been streaming concerts that I pay for from Stable. So this is, yep, they've already got concert streaming services that you could pay for and watch at home. And that's something that's going to continue probably. I mean, I probably will partake in more stream concerts because, I mean, they do tiny desk concerts and things on YouTube and things, but I'm sure that why not monetize it? Yeah, I mean, put it on the streaming platform and people could watch it live or watch it for 10 days like they do here. And, then it's gone. But yeah, Kelly, I mean, to the point that you're saying, I'm in a very similar almost conundrum with Enclave because we, as you said, we filmed a documentary that, to be able to get the work out there, because we didn't know if the Queens Botanical Gardens was going to be able to open for the public to be able to see the work at the beginning of the pandemic. So with that looming, I really spearheaded, filming and learning Adobe Premiere Pro and making it. And, thankfully the Astoria Film Festival picked it up, and it was great because we were able to, make other connections in the Queens community that way. But it was a very new thing. I mean, it was useful knowledge, because then I was able to use that to be able to edit the footage for my performance, for my personal work, my performance for Materials for the Arts, and also for the show that I did at Flux Factory. And it's something I'm going to continue to do for my own work, just because I would like, if I do any performances, I would like it to live online. But in terms of taking it on for every single show that I do and every show that Enclave does, I mean, it's just another beast that, not quite sure. I mean, we'll see like in a couple of years, like how necessary it is, how much everyone else is doing it, how much of a need, for people to want to go online and stream things if they can't make it to the show. And, how much more content, other organizations are pumping out that, obviously we want to be able to have our work, our artists' work, like reach the greatest amount of people as possible. So, it's time will tell how necessary it is, but I feel you.
Yeah. So in summary, it sounds like it's a positive thing if that can be used for a positive good, as long as we recognize the labor that goes into it and compensate people accordingly. Right.
I think it's also managing it. It's interesting because we can look at YouTube as a model, and the people who do best with their channels are the ones that don't overfill with content. They're not the people that give you something. You may enjoy a channel, but it's very hard to create interesting content when they're doing something like 4 or 5 times a week. After a while, if you think about it, they have like 200 videos and 300 videos, 400 videos, and how many of them that you really look? You might look at really about 20% of them. The smart ones, I know one guy does this. This is the coin world. Performers don't do it enough, I have to say. Performers don't do it enough, but it's very interesting. In collectibles, it's a wide range, but the best one, the one that I saw best, does it once a week, puts the time saying, we're going to be doing something. I think that's like the most you should ever do something is once a week with the recording and, the more involved stuff. Because anything more, and even that, you don't always have to do, but anything more, it's just going to be, especially with art, painting, film. The nice thing about that stuff is that, we benefit from second, third, fourth, fifth viewings and hearings. Anything's worth, anything that you put your work into and integrity will benefit from repeated hearings and listenings and watchings. So you don't have to worry about, it's not like some YouTube channels where I'm giving a reaction video to hearing a Def Leppard for the first time. What are their songs? It's like, how much they have to keep churning out. So, I'd say the other thing that can keep it moderated is just, we don't need to overproduce. That's the other thing I want to say about the new normal. The old normal always tended to me about overproduction of things, overproduction of just even art. Sometimes the lesson of COVID has been that, less, it sounds corny, but less is more sometimes. You don't always have to be churning out tons of stuff. And people actually your audience can benefit from a little rest sometimes and get a chance to just be familiar with your older stuff, some of the stuff that you did last year or the year before, or like with QCA, it'll be like, you must have wanted to do this with some people, say, did you take time to actually read the website carefully, or did you just caught up on one of our newest videos? And sometimes it's like to say, just to look at our stuff, take some time. I don't know, that's the thing I think was the greatest gift, is just have time to think and learn your patience, develop patience. That was one thing too.
Absolutely. I think that is a good place to leave it. We are at a little bit over time. I want to say thank you to Chris and Dario for your wonderful presentations and insights. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Really appreciate you spending Thursday evening with us. We do this once a month, third Thursday of the month, and would love to see you again. Before you sign off, if you all want to keep in touch with each other, encourage you to drop your social media or website in the chat so you all can stay connected as Queens Creatives. Well, thank you all. It was nice to virtually meet some people.
Thank you for having us, guys. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks so much, everyone, and thanks so much, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks again, Kelly. And everybody have a good one. Stay safe.
Bye.
Thanks, Anna. The website.
Bye, everyone. Stay safe.
Bye.